Number 7. Mechele Linehan. Alaska woman Mechele Linehan first met Kent LePink in the early 1990s at the Gentleman's Club where she worked as an exotic dancer. The pair were romantically involved until May of 1996 when 36-year-old LePink was found dead in the former gold mining town of Hope with 3 .44 caliber Desert Eagle gunshot wounds. In the wake of his death, suspicions immediately fell upon Linehan and her boyfriend, John Carlin, who were accused of orchestrating the shooting as a way of gaining access to the victim's $1 million life insurance policy. A few days before his death, LePink had changed the beneficiary on the policy, citing concerns he developed about the intentions of his girlfriend and her lover. In October of 2007, Linehan and Carlin were convicted of LePink's murder and consequently jailed for life. However, following a series of petitions for the convictions to be overturned, the Alaska Court of Appeals eventually dismissed the guilty verdicts in 2010, although Carlin died before he could be released. The court reportedly concluded that 2 pieces of evidence that had been prominently featured during the original murder trial shouldn't have been admissible in the first place. Testimony that Linehan had modeled her murder plot after the 1994 film The Last Seduction because she admired the main character was identified as one of the improper court submissions. The other was a letter the victim had penned to his parents, in which he stated that if he were to die under suspicious circumstances, Linehan would be the culprit. The man had further urged his parents to take Mechele down and make sure she is prosecuted. Alaska prosecutors ultimately decided not to indict Linehan a second time, and she was thus allowed to walk free. As of the latest updates on the matter, the exonerated woman had moved to Tacoma, Washington, where she began operating a laser clinic. Number 6. Kenneth Oliver. In 1996, California man Kenneth Oliver was sentenced to life in prison on a joyriding conviction under the state's 3-strike sentencing law for repeat felons. At the age of 16, Oliver had faced criminal charges in connection to his alleged role in an armed robbery. He was later arrested again while a passenger in a stolen vehicle, and a stolen handgun was also found in his hotel room. The joyriding incident was the latest in a string of crimes that led to him being sent to prison for life. Oliver was also ordered to serve 8 years in solitary confinement because he was found to be in possession of purported gang materials, including a book written by Black Guerrilla Family co-founder George Jackson, just days before he died during a violent escape attempt from San Quentin State Prison. It was Oliver's possession of this book that made him ineligible for resentencing, even after the 3 strikes law was amended to allow life sentences only when the third offense is a violent felony. The man spent a total of 23 years behind bars before he finally broke ground in his attempts to appeal his sentence. In the summer of 2019, the California Corrections Department expunged Oliver's supposed gang affiliation from his official record, paying him a $125,000 settlement for his years in solitary. It was reported that following the man's subsequent release from prison, he made plans to become a paralegal, helping others through social justice programs while reconnecting with his 3 adult children. Number 5. Cyntoia Brown. On the night of August the 6th of 2004, Cyntoia Brown met with 43-year-old Johnny Michael Allen in the parking lot of a Sonic drive-in in Nashville, Tennessee. Brown, who was 16 at the time, reportedly accompanied the man back to his home, where she agreed to have intercourse with him in exchange for $150. Before the intimate encounter occurred, however, Brown became concerned that Allen might try to harm her. She thought he was reaching for a weapon, which prompted her to brandish a firearm of her own and shoot him in the back of the head. The teen subsequently pilfered $172 from the man's wallet and a pair of his handguns, then fled the scene. During the ensuing criminal trial, prosecutors accused Brown of gunning Allen down as part of a premeditated plan to rob him, while she maintained that she'd been acting in self-defense. Brown was ultimately convicted of first-degree murder, felony murder, and aggravated robbery, and was consequently sent to prison for life, despite her status as a juvenile offender. Upon launching a fierce campaign to appeal her conviction, Brown revealed that she'd been trapped in an abusive relationship with a drug dealer at the time of the incident and had been forced into a life of prostitution. Criminal justice reform activists thus began using the case as an example of a teenage human trafficking victim who was unreasonably incarcerated for acting in the interest of self-preservation. In 2019, Tennessee Governor Bill Haslam commuted Brown's sentence to 15 years plus 10 years of probation. Having already served 15 years, the woman was released. She and her husband subsequently founded the JFAM Foundation, which aims to empower individuals who are at risk of exploitation or criminal justice system involvement. Number 4. Alvin Kennard. 22-year-old Alvin Kennard was arrested in 1983 for robbing Highlands Bakery in Bessemer, Alabama. The young man reportedly held the establishment up with a pocket knife before making off with just $50.75 in stolen cash. Despite the measly return, Kennard was charged with first-degree robbery after being taken into custody in the aftermath. According to subsequent reports, the 1983 arrest marked the second time Kennard had been busted for robbery in his young adult life. Back in 1979, he pled guilty to 3 counts of second-degree robbery in connection to a break-in at an unoccupied gas station. For his latest criminal exploits, Kennard was ultimately imprisoned for life after being sentenced under Alabama's Habitual Felony Offender Act, which at the time could trigger lifetime sentences depending on a defendant's criminal history. Under sentencing guidelines enacted after his incarceration, Kennard would have only received a maximum of 21 years, as per court records. Nevertheless, the man spent the next 36 years behind bars before an appeal of his conviction was finally successful. At a hearing in August of 2019, Kennard was resentenced to time served and was released shortly thereafter. During his resentencing hearing, Kennard, who'd by that time turned 58, said to the court, "I take responsibility for what I did in the past. I want the opportunity to get it right." Number 3. Terence "Gangster" Williams. After serving more than 20 years of a life sentence, Terence "Gangster" Williams was unexpectedly released from prison in January of 2022. Williams, the half-brother of Cash Money Records founder Brian "Birdman" Williams, had initially been arrested following an FBI investigation into his illicit activities as a member of the Hot Boys gang. He was accused of plotting to kill a group of New York drug dealers, which federal investigators learned via wiretaps. The man pleaded guilty to engaging in a continuing criminal enterprise and solicitation of murder, resulting in his life sentence. Over the course of subsequent years, Williams was said to have begun cooperating with the authorities in securing guilty pleas from co-defendants. Although the circumstances surrounding Williams's eventual release weren't made clear, it's been suggested that it was the substantial assistance he reportedly provided law enforcement while incarcerated that precipitated his life term being reduced to just 27.5 years upon appeal. Number 2. Kendall Gordon. In 2010, New Orleans teen Kendall Gordon stood trial for the murder of Patrice Commodore. On August the 8th of 2009, the latter had been shot in the head by a pair of bandana-clad robbers, one old and one young, who made off with $200. One of the assailants, identified as 18-year-old Jesse Bibbins, was later found dead from a gunshot wound to the neck he'd sustained during the home invasion. In the incident's immediate aftermath, eyewitness Darceline Commodore told the police that she believed 19-year-old Kendall Gordon to have been the younger gunman involved. Upon learning that it was Bibbins who'd sustained injuries in the shooting, however, Commodore recanted her identification of Gordon, who was nevertheless arrested and brought to trial on a second-degree murder charge. Throughout the court proceedings, Commodore repeatedly admitted to having been mistaken about Gordon's involvement in the crime. Orleans Parish District Judge Frank Marullo Jr. stated that he believed Commodore had recanted her original identification of Gordon because she feared for her safety. The defendant was ultimately convicted of the murder and given a life sentence with no chance of parole. His initial attempts to appeal the guilty verdict proved unsuccessful. However, after partnering with the New Orleans chapter of the Innocence Project, Gordon petitioned for the Forensic Analytical Crime Lab to perform further testing on DNA evidence found at the crime scene. In doing so, investigators excluded Gordon as a possible contributor to the DNA mixtures recovered, and the young man's defense team thus motioned for his conviction to be vacated. The motion was granted in December of 2021, and Gordon was liberated after erroneously serving 12 years behind bars. Number 1. William Allen. In 1994, when Massachusetts resident William Allen was in his early 20s, he took part in a violent robbery that culminated in the fatal stabbing of Purvis Bester in Brockton. Although it was Allen's accomplice who'd committed the killing, both men subsequently faced murder charges in connection to the incident. Allen refused to plead guilty to the charges, citing the fact that he hadn't been the one to attack Bester on the night of his death. It was the young man's unwillingness to take a plea deal that led to him being automatically sentenced to life without parole following his eventual conviction. Prosecutors had taken advantage of a former Massachusetts law which stipulated that a defendant who participated in a deadly crime but played no role in the murder itself could still be punished as harshly as the actual killer. This particular legislation was amended in 2017 after the state Supreme Judicial Court ruled that a person who didn't kill couldn't be charged with first-degree murder. Following the change in the law, Allen attempted to appeal his conviction and was supported in his efforts by a number of prominent Massachusetts figures, including New England Patriots player Devin McCourty and Plymouth County District Attorney Tim Cruz. In May of 2022, after Allen had spent nearly 28 years locked up, he was finally released. The Governor's Council had unanimously approved commuting the man's conviction to second-degree murder, thus making him eligible for parole. In the wake of Allen's highly publicized release, many were quick to note a darkly ironic aspect of the case. The man who'd actually stabbed Purvis Bester back in 1994 was freed on parole more than a decade before Allen's eventual release because he'd pleaded guilty to his original charges. Thanks for watching. Would you rather spend an entire year in prison or use crutches to walk for the rest of your life? Let us know in the comments section below.